This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at Endless Path Zendo.
This is a very special day. This is a very humbling day, and a very joyous day. It's not quite the day of the Buddha's enlightenment, which is traditionally December 8th, but 26 or 27 or 28, 25, 100 years ago, we don't really know exactly how many, there really was a Prince Siddhartha Gautama who really was deeply troubled to see the facts of our life, the fundamental injustice of being born, having to age, sicken, die, troubled him really deeply, so deeply that even as a member of the 1% of his culture and time, he gave it up to live the life of a mendicant, a homeless beggar, essentially, undergo extremely demanding and difficult practices in order, after 6 years of almost life-threatening effort, to get to the bottom of why human beings suffer the way we do and cause so much suffering because of our own suffering. He finally settled into pure zazen. Supposedly he was actually experiencing his breath. That was his practice at that point, sitting beneath the Bodhi Tree. And he made a resolve. He resolved that now that he was settled at the center of the world, the navel of the world, Omphalos, as it's known in mythology, the very navel, the center point of the world, that is seating at the base of the Bodhi Tree, which is a ritual we reenact every time we enter the Zendo. First we bow to the Buddha, then we come to our place and we bow to our seat before turning and bowing to the Sangha. This is to acknowledge that this spot where we will be doing our work is like the Bodhi Tree was for the Buddha. It's the center of the universe. This is where we will work towards our realization of intimacy with everything that is. In any case, he made a resolve that even if his flesh and bones should wither away, he wasn't going to get up till he had awakened to full realization, till he had opened full realization. That was his vow. It's hard to imagine knowing the faltering efforts we ourselves make and the amount of help we each need and have received in order to continue practicing over years. How a person of 29, with all the distractions of a body and mind of 29, potential to it, could simply make that kind of effort and go through all those conditions of mind that are beautiful, encouraging, wonderful, hopeful, helpful, profound, without stopping, without getting hung up in any of it, until he had opened up every potential of the human mind for wisdom, compassion, and discovered it was our birthright. It wasn't something we add on, but is our birthright if we really can drop our deeply entangled habits of self-centeredness. Having been dealing with a surprise health issue this last month, I can only tell you how shockingly entangled one's sense of self actually is, moment by moment, especially when your breath is compromised. There's not much you can do about evading it. And it really is shocking to see how entangled a stubborn sense of isolation really is how grateful I am to be able to finally, after a month of heart and breath issues, to be able to sit again and really feel that kind of joy of letting everything go. I cannot tell you how fundamental it is to a sense of well-being in this life, regardless of whatever else is going on. So I am really happy to be here, but also it's quite humbling to realize what the Buddha did. And without him having done what he did on his own, out of the deep sense of anguish he experienced, not because he was, everything's great and I think I'll become a Buddha. It was like, man, this is painful. I've got to do something about it. And he actually did it. He just didn't say, one day I'll do something about it. He actually did it in the midst of all the pain and confusion and whatever else you may, each one of us may be experiencing at this moment. He actually got to the bottom of it. That's a tremendously humbling inspiration, I find. We owe this person so much, and of course all the teachers we might have worked with who've helped us to personalize this so it didn't stay a concept way out there at arm's length. I am really happy to be back teaching is all I can tell you. It feels like seeing everyone I've been able to see this morning in the Zendo, on Zoom and in Doksan has been very, very fulfilling. So, hopefully we'll have time for a Teisho. What we're going to look at, maybe edit a bit as we go, is the Buddha's Enlightenment. And I'll be reading an excerpt, perhaps from a chapter in A Zen Life of Buddha, published by Sumeru back in 2023, I believe. The new book that just came out with them is Finding Your Buddha Smile, Coming Home to What Zen is Really All About. I like working with them because I get to create the book the way I'd like it to be. As flawed as that's usually the case, but still, there's some hope they'll come up with something that I actually feel good about. So, Enlightenment. Now, the first section of this is basically a narrative about the Buddha's Enlightenment that I created back in 1972 or 3, which has been used ever since. Roshi Kapleau loved it, and it's been used ever since at all Kapleau lineage centers around the world for their Buddha's Enlightenment ceremony. So this may be, I may have revised it a bit for this, but anyway, touching the earth, seeing a star. So I'll read this and then I'll comment on it. At the age of 29, the sheltered prince of the Shakya clan, Siddhartha Gautama, really saw and took in the facts of impermanence, having seen an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and last of all, a homeless truth seeker. He was precipitated into a struggle for truth that was to persist until full awakening, indeed Buddhahood, had been realized. Buddhahood would mean the actualization of every potential of the mind for full consciousness, for wisdom, for compassion. All the latent powers of the mind, and supposedly we use only, 10% of what our mind's potential is, or brain's potential is. He actualized it all, is at least the legendary take. So leaving the palace, he rode to the river boundary of his father's kingdom. There at the river's edge, he severed his attachment to palace life, cutting off his long hair with a sword stroke. Crossing the river, he left his sheltered life of luxury and ease and disappeared alone into the forest and mountains. He made his way to the hermitages of the two most noted religious teachers of his time. Mastering their methods, he found no lasting freedom from birth, old age, sickness, or death. He moved on to truly isolated places that held terror for a sheltered ex-city boy such as himself, deep forests, graveyards, charnel grounds, forcing himself to undergo the most fearful austerities. He then reduced his intake of food until he was eating first 1,000, then 100, then 10, then at last just one single sesame seed a day. His flesh withered, his eyes sank into their sockets, his hair rotted and fell out. Every rib, each bony socket and joint stood out exposed like the wreck of a ship when the tide withdraws. After 6 years of such effort exhausted, and at the point of death, he collapsed more a skeleton wound with sinews and veins than a living man. His great effort had failed. As you come up the stairs to the Zendo, you'll see a carving that a friend, Fred Epsteiner, brought back from India years ago. It's a carving of a very famous figure of the Buddha undergoing austerities. And you'll see, here, I can hold this up here. Sinews and veins. That's how intense this young, sheltered ex-prince was in his practice. He meant what he said. He would do it or he would die trying. And every now and then, we remember that he meant it for real. He totally committed. That's kind of the nadir, the absolute bottom of his effort. He was closest to death simply from forcing himself to practice the greatest, most grievous austerities, thinking that somehow that, punishing the body, would bring him to enlightenment. In other words, he was desperate. He did things no sane person would do. He was that desperate. It's hard to understand how someone at 29 with all that life energy would be that desperate, that driven by a sense of impermanence to do such things. This is a very, in many ways, totally focused personality. And yet he had a very gentle childhood and was a very gentle person according to all records. Anyway, his great effort had failed. For all his willful exertions, he'd found no great truth and no release from birth, sickness, aging, and death. Now it seemed he must die without attaining his goal. The bitterness of that moment after 6 years of unrelenting but now seemingly wasted effort had to be beyond belief. And then right there at the dead-end limit of the ascetic path, he took that path of punishing the self to the limit and found it didn't work, which was an important lesson for anyone who has that kind of self-punishing habit pattern. It's good to realize that it doesn't work. The middle way, a way of balance, a way of fulfillment, is really what the Buddha uncovered. In any case, he went out and at the end of that path, a memory out of his childhood suddenly came to him at this moment where he's totally lost it. And this is the memory. He had been sitting quietly under a rose apple tree at the annual plowing festival, watching his father, the king, Suddhodana was his name, along with all the Shakya clan's nobles and poor men alike, plowing the earth together as a kind of egalitarian event. He saw the earth breaking open in even wave-like furrows, the heat shimmering up off the freshly opened soil and shining on the sweat-slicked brows and straining bodies of men and oxen alike, the sun continuously flashing off the gilded traces and horns of the oxen. He heard the senseless plodding rhythm of hooves and cowbells rolling in a solemn, sea-like way beneath the shriller shouts of the men, and whirring cries of the birds as they dove to peck at and devour the billowing hordes of insects, blind, glistening grubs, cutworms, and broken bodies of mice which men, oxen, and plows had left in the wake. The terror, remember, this is his memory as he's sitting there after having almost killed himself with ascetic practices. The terribly obvious laboring, devouring, suffering, and dying, which went on interminably beneath all the gay surface tinseling of the festival, had broken in upon him then and weighed heavily on his mind. Remember, he was just a child when this happened, and he's remembering it. Seated alone beneath the sweet-smelling rose-apple tree, reflecting deeply on the scene before him, he'd entered a profound samadhi. Remember, this was with no training, no previous practice. It just opened to him. And of course, that's true, isn't it? We all have memories of something, maybe out of childhood, that something opened, some sense of connection with the trees, or with an animal, or with the grass, with stars, with a person, something you couldn't explain, a wider, a richer, more intimate world that closed up, that got lost somehow as you grew up. This is not an unusual experience. The difference may be, for those who come to practice, and like this for the Buddha, is that it became a strong enough memory to let him know there is something else. And it can be realized if I had this experience already as a child. So anyway, he has this experience, and now at the brink of death, and in this memory, and in the depths of despair, this memory returned, filling him with energy and sureness. If he'd already glimpsed the way when just a child, well fed and well clothed, then mere punishment of either the body or mind was pointless in terms of gaining realization. And at that moment, just like that, he decided to eat properly again. He didn't mull over it. He saw he had been doing something completely wrong in punishing the body in order to try and gain some kind of understanding. And he stopped. He stopped doing what was harmful right then and there. And then, as if in immediate response, Sujata, a maiden from a neighboring village, came to him and offered a bowl of life-saving milk rice, because he was basically on a point of starvation. Not like I'm starving, I'm hungry, but a point of starvation. When he accepted her life-saving gift, his 5 fellow ascetic disciples up and left him, convinced that this ex-prince had turned soft, had abandoned the quest for truth, and resumed a worldly life. When he had finished eating, he felt strong enough to stand, and leaning on his staff was able to make his way to the nearby Naranjana River. And he bathed there, letting the river wash away 6 years of accumulated dirt and filth. Climbing back up onto the shore again, he announced, "If this is the day of my supreme enlightenment, may this bowl float upstream." This is one of the mythic elements in the story, of course. And he cast his empty offering bowl onto the waters. And as soon as the bowl touched the river surface, it forged upstream to the whirlpool. Again, now we're in mythic territory, not so much history as legend, but it has its grace notes. It adds this tone of timelessness and depth, as myth often does, that suggests something very real, not pretend. Myth is a language that touches something very real. And these elements are not arbitrary, let's put it that way. And there it came to the whirlpool of Kala Nagaraja, the black snake king who dwells on the river bottom. There it whirled down to the jeweled chambers of the Naga king's palace, stopping against an endless row of such identically formed bowls. And hearing that little sound, that clink of bowl against bowl, the Naga king opened his eyes, slowly raised his ancient hooded head, and announced, "Yesterday a Buddha arose." Of course, he's talking about kalpas, that yesterday. And you know what a kalpa is. It's a geographic time scale, geologic rather, time scale, which supposedly, let's say there's a mountain the height of Mount Everest, and once every 100 years, a deva flies down from one of the heavens, a god, and brushes the top of Mount Everest with the silken sleeve of their robe once every 100 years. A kalpa is the geologic time it would take for Mount Everest to be worn down to sea level. So kalpas in the past is the last time a Buddha rose, and this Naga king remembers that time. Another wonderfully mythic element giving us a scale of time that we can hardly comprehend. Yesterday a Buddha arose. Today there shall be another Buddha. Swaha, awake, rejoice. And swaying in that timeless shimmering light, he began to chant his songs of assurance in the Bodhisattva's triumph and victory. Revitalized and encouraged, Siddhartha Gautama, remember that was his name as a prince, he's actually an ex-prince now, strode towards the Bodhi Tree, where in the cool, soft light of the late afternoon, he met the grass cutter, Sotia, who offered 8 bundles of grass as a sitting cushion and mat. The future Buddha spread the grass at the base of the tree, and seating himself in the lotus posture with his resolve rooted as a mountain, announced, "Though only my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and my blood and flesh dry up and wither away, I will not stir from the seat until I've attained or realized full enlightenment." And he pressed forward again in meditation. And now we come to kind of the classic moment of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, which could go like this. Many versions exist of this part of the story. Many visions arose, fearsome and foul, as well as seductive and pleasant. There's something very Jungian almost about this, at least deeply psychological, of all of life's forces of clinging to states of joy, comfort, and ease appear to him in the form of, we can turn this into an archetype, 3 women, the 3 beautiful daughters of Mara the tempter, and they danced before him, offering exquisite pleasure and comfort, while at the same time all life's terrors, fears of death and suffering, of hell's horrors, pain, ugliness, the unknown, mobbed him, shrieking of torment, deformity, of all manner of terrible and disgusting experience should he persist. This is Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Path, the final challenge. It's worldwide. It has to do with the nature of the human mind and the things we carry, our attachments to pleasures, joys, our terrible fears of suffering, horror, the unknown, everything that threatens our sense of self. And this is initiatory territory, certainly worldwide. It's extremely familiar to anyone who's worked on themselves, a sense of fears and awareness of one's attachments and yearnings and desires. And at the same time, if you've done any reading into myth or certain kinds of psychology, you'll find how truly worldwide this kind of thing is. But here it is in full-blown version in the life of the Buddha, which is perhaps one reason Joseph Campbell felt the life of the Buddha was really the core story. If you're looking for a spiritual story about coming from planet Earth, as you'll see, there's another Earth connection here. In any case, it's classic. Mara's army descended upon him, horse-headed, 10-eyed, tiger-faced, many-armed, with face, in other words, they're horrible, with faces in their chests, with sharp yellow teeth and blood-dripping mouths, with spiders for hands, hissing, with adders' tongues. On they came, hurling stones, knives, spears, hurling flaming discs, mud and filth. Screaming madly, they whirled down upon him like a flock of hunger-maddened crows wildly striving to peck and tear some lightest scraps of nourishment from a huge smooth stone, and they could not. Then Mara the tempter, we might say that's our own inner voice of self-centered conditioning, sometimes protective, sometimes tempting, sometimes misleading, all of that in ourselves. Trickster, but not quite as healthy as a trickster. Tempter, to divert from your deepest purpose as a human being and get more entertained. In any case, Mara the tempter approached the future Buddha, and assuming the voice of Gautama's own innerness, the habit voice of his thoughts, began to question the future Buddha with these words. Are you sure you are the one? Sure you have this Buddha nature? Sure you're worthy of coming to supreme enlightenment today, right now? Think of it. Supreme enlightenment. I mean, supreme enlightenment. And this is a really interesting moment that comes next. It's classic. If you look up on our altar, you'll see there's the Buddha touching the earth. I assume most of you can picture that scene. The Buddha doesn't ask for help. He doesn't look up to heaven. He doesn't call upon any guides or aids. What he does when challenged by Mara about whether he is worthy right now to realize full enlightenment just as he is, his response is simply to reach down and touch the earth lightly with his right hand and ask the earth to witness for him. And the earth replied with 100, 1,000, 100,000 voices, the voices of furrows and graves, the voices of youth and age, of man, woman, and child, the unheeded cries of beasts, the quick unknown silvery language of fish, the sweet twinings of plants, and the warm gray crumblings of stone. For all were one voice, thundering, he is worthy. There is not one spot on this globe where he has not offered himself totally, selflessly through endless lifetimes, to the attainment of enlightenment and the welfare of all living beings. Essentially what you have here is a summation of the Jataka tales. It's saying that it's not just this one lifetime of work. You don't get a person this dedicated, this committed, this courageous, this caring, this selfless from one lifetime of being a young man aged 29. It comes from countless efforts made by this being, made through countless lifetimes in countless life forms, whether as human, as God, as animal, as spirit, as tree, whatever. Anywhere on the globe. It doesn't mean it all happened in India. It means this person has been working on wisdom, compassion, selflessness, doing essentially good for others, leaving self-centered behaviors and thoughts behind. For so long, it's uncountable. And the only way to testify to it is to ask the earth, which has been here through all of it, which has seen all of it, which has trod on, which has stepped on, which is mistreated so often. But the earth is our witness to everything. And the earth is so interestingly called on in Buddhist tradition by the Buddha about to be as his witness. It's a rarity, I think, to have a tradition that's built upon calling upon the earth rather than calling for the heavens. Calling upon the earth, I find that tremendously moving and encouraging, to be sure. In any case, with this response from the earth, that he is worthy. Mara and his host dropped their weapons and fled. His daughters prostrated and asked forgiveness. His great war elephant, mountain-girded is its name, the lumbering vehicle of ego's prideful strength, came crashing to the ground like a heap of stones before the man seated so quietly and intensely before him. His zazen was quite active. It doesn't mean forced. It doesn't mean self-willed, but it was active. There's an intensity to keep on, to stay with this moment, to stay with this breath, to let everything go again and again, in which realization and this moment are not two things really at all. Our own nature and this very moment, our breath, our hearing sounds, our seeing colors with the eyes, these are not separate things at all. This is not a dream. This is our own potential, our own nature. It's being demonstrated in this story. I find that so interesting and encouraging. Alone beneath the Bodhi tree, the future Buddha pressed on, endlessly on without stopping anywhere, arousing deeper and deeper practice without cease, swallowing the darkness with his own light until the dawn. With the dawn, his mind grows clear and radiant and obvious as the daybreak. And when he glanced at the morning star, he found enlightenment itself crying out, wonder of wonders. Intrinsically, all living beings are Buddhas, endowed with wisdom and virtue. This is the fundamental insight of the Buddha, whether you think he was crazy to say such a thing, or whether you think, maybe he was on to something. It makes all the difference in the world. But that's what it says. He glanced at the morning star. Get that. He wasn't perfect sitting there with his eyes down. He glanced up at the morning star. What a goof, right? You're supposed to keep your eyes down. He's doing zazen. No, he glances up at the morning star and wham! Dogen says, to become one with the 10,000 things is called delusion. But when the 10,000 things step in and realize themselves as the self, this is intimacy or realization. Wham! He sees the morning star. And then there's just the morning star sitting on that cushion of grass and leaves under the Bodhi tree. And the morning star that's sitting at the base of the Bodhi tree exclaims, wonder of wonders! Intrinsically, all living beings are Buddhas, endowed with wisdom and virtue. I mean, how could that be? There are some really mean, some really cruel people on this earth, doing really terrible things. Let's be honest, it's not all lovely. Oh, everyone's a Buddha, how wonderful, how sweet, how charming, how delightful. No, it's like, is this guy crazy? Or is he touching something that deeply, deeply makes sense? I just don't have a language for it. How could everyone and everything be a Buddha endowed with wisdom and virtue? But that also means me. And it doesn't mean when I've finished lifetimes of practice, then I'll have wisdom and virtue. This guy, 2,500 years ago, is saying, right now, as confused as I am, as dumb as I am, as pitiful as I am, I'm endowed with all the wisdom and virtue in the universe, and I can wake to it just as I am. Not when I'm a better person than I am. Not when I'm a fully realized person and wise and compassionate. But right now, just as I am. If you believe that the Buddha wasn't a fool and he wasn't a liar when he spontaneously exclaimed this, then you're in for a lifetime of trouble. Join this crazy group, this crazy crowd. Because if you believe it, you're going to have to start working on yourself to understand what that means and to find that wisdom and compassion, which is your own potential, rather than try and hand it off to someone else to be wise and compassionate. No, it's going to be you. It's going to have to be each of us. And we're going to have to, like the Buddha, make up our minds to do it, even if it means changes in our lives. I'm not saying do what he did, give up your life and go and emaciate yourself for the sake of truth. But find a way for it to be real for you, if you believe those words. If you don't think he was a fool, if you don't think he was a liar, and find a way to make that real. Find a way to bring a practice of working towards the insight into that, your own practice in your own life. That's the challenge that comes from those words. I just did a terrible thing to you. I threw those words right into your brain. Now you're going to have to figure out what to do about it. But you can't forget them. They're too crazy. And you can't ignore them because they're too stimulating. And if you're aware of a need for wisdom and compassion in this world, you're going to have to grapple with them and figure out what to do about it. So, it was December 8th. He was 35 years of age and had broken through, though I no longer really like that language of breaking through, but he had realized what others as yet had only half dreamed. The path had been reopened. The Dharma was once again accessible to the efforts of humans and devas. In the steadily rising morning light, a supreme Buddha now sat beneath the suddenly blossoming tree. So that's kind of a commented upon version of the Buddha's Enlightenment story that I created back in 1972 or 3. The commentary in the book is too long to add to that already commented upon version, but if you get a copy of Zen Life of Buddha, you'll be able to read the whole thing yourself. Or, to tell you the truth, thanks to Elena, that is, I think, fully recorded last year in our Rohatsu Teisho, and you can go and listen to it for free at the Endless Path Zendo website. But maybe there's a thing or two here that I can add as a little excerpt. To round this out. Okay, there's this. And even though the ex-prince sat and sat, we know that from his life story, in the end, simply sitting and meditating wasn't enough. There had to be a trigger to his realization. It didn't come just from looking within. Looking within is the groundwork, the tilling of the soil, but it is not yet awakening. It could have been a word, a sound, anything really, for his mind was ripe, empty of fixed notions, conditioned habitual limits. So after a long night of intensely focused zazen, and that was the whole thing with Mara and his beautiful, attractive daughters and his horrible, horrifying, terrifying army, is that psychological breakthrough or movement through the forces of our psyches, our terror and our wonder. He glanced up and saw the morning star, and suddenly, aha, gone, gone, entirely gone. That's it. A morning star sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Star, no me, just star. And then I wrote, it need not be so dramatic, a poem of Li Po's from ancient China titled Zazen on Qingting Mountain. It goes like this. So think about that moment. The Buddha sees the morning star and all his self-centeredness completely falls away. And the star steps in. The birds have vanished down the sky. This is the essence of zazen he's talking about. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. Familiar, isn't it? The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. We sit together, the doorknob and me, until only the doorknob remains. Let's see if there's any other little thing in here that might be interesting. Interesting that the last challenge the Buddha had to face, and I talk about this somewhat for a couple of pages in this, was self-doubt. Look at this. The Buddha, after, the story is countless lifetimes of practice, countless lifetimes of self-sacrifice, countless lifetimes of unbelievable commitment and making mistakes and learning to do better and all of that. You see that in the Jataka tales. The last challenge he faces is self-doubt. So if you think, oh, why should I be burdened with self-doubt? It's our nature. It's our nature. That's just how it is. We have so much potential, it's hard to possibly believe, given what we've been conditioned to believe about ourselves, that it could be me. That what the Buddha was talking about, he meant me. I have this potential to wake to limitless virtue, wisdom, compassion, that it is really my own nature, and I don't know it. That's crazy. Self-doubt, even for the Buddha, is what came up at the end. I think that's really encouraging, because we're all going to hit self-doubt in a variety of forms as we go along. It's key, it's core. And obviously, this was recognized by Buddhist tradition very early on. The Buddha, in the last instant, faces the temptation of Mara to turn away and say, yeah, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I got a lot of work to do on myself. It sounds very humble and very honest, but that's not what he does. He touches the earth and asks the earth to witness for him. And there's something quite extraordinary about that in the face of self-doubt. But we're all going to have it, and we're all going to have to deal with it. Let's see, anything else here? Well, let's end with this. This is the last paragraph or so. Our fundamental vow as human beings is to know ourselves. I don't think that's a big stretch. I would say that's still makes sense to me. Our fundamental vow as human beings is to know ourselves. It's somehow the thing we know least about. How can I be this body? How does it know to do these things? How do I know how to digest food? How do I know how to think thoughts? How do I know how to see colors with my eyes? How do I know how to do anything, really? And what is this self, by the way? I still haven't been able to locate it. Is it in my head? Is it in my chest? Is it in my legs? I mean, it's kind of wacky being a human being when you really take a look at it, isn't it? Our fundamental vow is to know ourselves. Our vow as human beings, because we have the potential to know ourselves, which I guess a worm doesn't, or even something as beautiful and wonderful as a cat doesn't. But as a human being, we do. We do have this ability to know ourselves. We practice not to become special thises or that's, but to know who or what we already are. Zen Master Dogen said, when the self advances to confirm the 10,000 things, it is called delusion. When the 10,000 things advance and confirm the self, it is intimacy or enlightenment. The 10,000 things are birds, bugs, clouds, mountains, rivers, people, animals, traffic sounds, cell phones, raindrops, pebbles, clumps of earth, bright morning stars. Ordinary things confirm us, tell us, indeed, make us who we are every day. There is no barrier between us and a single thing. Nothing is hidden. That enlightenment is intimacy is not cleverness, but truth. Because this is so, each of us already has the potential to wake to it. Touching the earth is always possible because real ground is never far away, and neither is a star.